Since I was young, my grandfather always told me not to go into the woods during the winter. He meant the Hatakan woods near the border of our reserve and not just any old forest. This always struck me as a scare tactic to keep the children from getting lost or climbing the trees, which were so tall you might think they were brushing against the clouds. That was until this morning. The day was going as per usual. I woke up and walked over to my grandparents' house to greet her for a morning cup of coffee. But something felt off of this morning. I'm not sure if it was just me still being tired from a shortened sleep due to the storm that had practically terrorized our grounds, but nonetheless, something was wrong. When I walked up those old steps on the front porch, it reminded me of the days I would go there as a young kid and jump up as many steps as possible because I was scared of something living under the porch, grabbing my ankles. Of course, this was just a nonsense fear, and I haven't done that for years. I knocked on the door in a way that wouldn't startle them in their old age, and after about 15 seconds, my grandmother opened the door. This is where I noticed something wasn't the same. As she pulled the door open, she looked at me with an almost confused look. She opened her mouth as if she were about to speak and ask what I was doing there, but her mouth closed and she remained silent. "Good morning, Grandma. How was your sleep?" I asked her to break the silence so we could move on with our morning routine. She looked at me once again. This time her eyes appeared diluted and scared. "Your grandfather hasn't come home since yesterday evening," she said in a timber voice. With this news, I didn't immediately know what to say. My grandfather was practically a seasoned veteran around these grounds and rarely got lost. I took the initiative to ask the questions that I feared I already knew the answer to. Where did he go last? When I asked this question, she stared in my eyes once again and said, "He went into the forest." My stomach dropped. My brain was suddenly filled with all the memories of him telling me how dangerous it was during the winter. I told her not to worry, and that he probably just got invested into a hunt and lost track of time. She still seemed off and was barely speaking to me, as if she was coming in and out of a daydream. Finally, I told her I was going to go look for him. After all, what did I have to fear? It was the middle of the day, and I had never been one to believe in these kind of myths and stories that grandparents tell youth to scare them. I should have believed them. I began to walk away, climbing down those porch stairs again, and when I heard my grandmother finally speak up once again, "He always liked those trees," she mumbled from behind me. I turned my head to see her staring up in the sky, smiling, and she slowly lowered her eyes down and met my own, still smiling. I would be lying if I said that this didn't at least creep me out. I mean, your husband is missing and you're smiling and remembering how he enjoyed the trees? I don't understand. Regardless, I will do my duty and see if I can find him. I walked for about 30 minutes, give or take, until I finally reached the border of the infamous woods which I had been so repeatedly warned about. It seemed normal to me, just a beautiful winter day where the bare trees held a couple inches of snow on each branch. A small amount of wind in the air, just enough to blow the snow around from time to time, but not enough to whistle. I began walking. Luckily, the snow was only a few inches deep, and my boots were high enough to cover. I walked and I walked, calling out my grandfather's name, over and over again, in hopes that he would hear me. He didn't respond. That was until I could have sworn that I heard someone whistling near this large oak tree about 100 feet in front of me. I began walking towards the whistle, but I started getting a strange feeling and the hairs on my body began to stand up as I got closer. The whistle was not caused by the wind, but it didn't sound like it was created by a person either. It was a single note, dragged out for about 10 seconds at a time, never changing. I neared the tree but didn't see anyone. I did the only thing left that I could do, and I began to raise my head and look up. There he was, tangled in the branches, and what looked like very limb on his body being broken, as if he had fallen from the top but got stuck on the way to the ground. I began to cry and scream for help, but then I heard that whistle again. Same note, same length. I looked up again, but this time his eyes were wide open, and his pupils were dilated, just like my grandmother's this morning when I met her for coffee. I am not proud of what happened next, but honestly I don't know what anyone else would have done. I ran as fast as I could back to the reserve. I was running, crying, screaming, and just hoping to see another pair of eyes that looked normal so I could get that image out of my head. I wanted to see my grandmother, but I was scared of her, and I was not sure if I could handle it. But of course I had to tell someone that my grandfather is in that tree and potentially alive. I went back to my place first to calm myself down, as I was not even entirely sure what just happened was real. It took about 5 minutes to calm down and have some water. Finally, I opened my front door, ready to deal with whatever I had just experienced. I began to run over to my grandparents' house again, almost tripping because my boots were not great for running, but I didn't care, I just had to get to their house. I got to the stairs of the porch and began to climb them, just like I do every morning. And just as I was about to knock on the front door, I heard something I couldn't believe. The whistle. The same one I heard in the woods not long ago. My body froze. Every hair on my body stood up once again. And I was struck with the most fear I had ever felt in my life as I saw my grandmother and grandfather staring at me through the front window, both smiling and whistling that same note in unison. I turned and ran as fast as I could, still hearing that same note being whistled in the distance, not stopping until I reached my house. I slammed the door behind me and locked it immediately. There was immediate silence, the kind of silence that makes you feel uneasy and anxious. A silence that is so loud it was deafening. I shut the blinds and sat in my house alone, left to think about what I had just experienced. The only thing I could think to do was write about it so I could reflect and see if I am going crazy or not. Maybe I am, who knows. Maybe I imagined the entire thing, because honestly that would be better than it all being real. My cousin and I decided to go up a few hours north for a nice winter cabin weekend. It went great, nothing creepy at all. On our final day, we packed up at 6 a.m. and hopped in the car to get an early start on the 5-hour drive we had ahead of us. It was a foggy morning, not actively snowing, but previous snowfalls had piled up quite a bit, making the drive a little risky in the dark early hours of the morning. My cousin was driving and we were chatting and listening to podcasts, not too aware of our surroundings. We were about 20 minutes into the drive when unfortunately the car skidded off the road a little, and we were very slightly grazed a tree. We got out to take a look, and by some miracle there was no damage or anything on the car. As my cousin started to laugh with relief, we were just thanking our luck. I shielded my eyes because of some idiot with their crazy high beams coming up behind us. So obnoxious, my cousin laughed, starting to open her door and step back in when the blinding headlights car honks and continues to keep it as they approach us. My cousin and I looked at each other, super confused, but quickly hopped back in the car. The car begins to slow down and we're able to see a man in the driver's seat. And he finally takes his hand off his horn and pulls up right next to the car, which is really dumb because we were off-road, and it was crazy slippery. He rolls down his window and motions for my cousin to roll down ours. We figure it's fine because he's still inside his car and we were in ours. "Hey there, ladies. In a rush this morning?" He laughs. Not really. Just trying to get home. Can we help you with something?" "Oh no, I just noticed you dropped something about 2 kilometers back. It fell out of your trunk." My cousin turned to look at me. "Did you shut the trunk when we left?" Yeah, dude, obviously, I replied, and knowing the way the car is shaped, we would have seen and definitely heard an open trunk. No thanks, sir. I think you might have us mixed up with someone, my cousin said, and immediately rolled up her window. This man just gave off bad vibes. He starts blaring his horn again and motioning for us to roll down the window. My cousin rolls it down again and sees him holding up some woman's underwear and smiling. See? This looks familiar? I can literally remember the exact tone in which he said that. No thanks, sir. You have a great day now. My cousin quickly rolled up her window again and floored it, quickly hopping back on the road, and thankfully the man was either taken aback or just gave up, and we didn't see him for the next hour or so. My cousin and I were both a little shaken up, but tried to laugh it off since we were safe and hadn't seen his car follow us. About 2 hours into our trip, we got off on an exit to fill up gas and to grab some breakfast. My cousin and I mobile ordered, and I was going to quickly run in to grab our food and drinks. It had started snowing at this point, and while the sun had been up for a bit, it was still foggy and gloomy, making it hard to see the surroundings. I ran in, and as I reached for our food, someone's arm reached over mine to grab a napkin, and I instantly flinched. When I look up, I truly almost shat myself. It was that man from earlier. Despite him never getting out of the car, he did have his lights on, and I was able to get a clear view of his face. It was him. I was sure of it. Look at us, just like old friends, he smiled at me. I immediately looked down, grabbed my food, and started walking out of the store. As I left, I heard him talking to the barista, saying, "See that beauty queen? That's my beauty queen." I almost had tears in my eyes because I was so terrified. I power walked back to the car, almost tripping outside because I was so scared and not walking like a normal person. I hopped in and screamed, "We need to get back on the road. He's inside that store." My cousin started laughing, thinking I was pranking her, but she quickly realized that was not the case when the man walked out of a few seconds later, with no drink or food in hand, straight towards our car. My cousin quickly started to turn the car on. When the man reached into his pocket, I genuinely thought he would pull out a weapon. Instead, he was holding up the underwear he had before. Thankfully, my cousin took no time in backing out of there and speeding onto the highway. We both were freaking out at this point, not sure how he ended up at the same stop as us, besides us not seeing him. He could have taken some sort of back roads we didn't know about, but it would have taken him much longer than us to get there. Unless he was trailing behind, I don't know. We quickly tried to find an alternate route on our Maps app, and thankfully there was one that made us go through some local roads which we hoped might help. Of course, with our luck, as we were going through a smaller town, I felt the car getting gradually lower on my side. We pulled over at a well-lit gas station and realized we were losing air in one of our tires. We were both too scared to get out, but figured if we went out together it might be less scary. So we did. We filled up the tire with some air and it seemed to be okay. We got back in the car, back on our way, and everything seemed fine until 10 minutes later, when this car seemed to appear out of nowhere but directly behind us. Our suspicions were confirmed when he blared his stupid horn yet again, then quickly swerved off the road to get right next to us, so this time he was on my side. He had his window rolled down and was screaming at us. At this point, I called my brother-in-law, who is a cop. He told us to drive directly to the nearest police station and to call them right away so they would be alert. As he was instructing me, the creep braked his car, just stopping on the side of the snowy, icy road. We were still speeding away, so it quickly got harder and harder to see him. But for what I could make out, he had gotten out of his car and was sitting on the hood. Just sitting on the hood of his car in the freezing snow weather. My cousin and I did not want to stop or do anything within about an hour left in our journey. we decided to just book it straight home, and thankfully, that was the end of that. I know we made a lot of stupid mistakes that could have potentially had horrible consequences, but I'm super happy we made it out alive and unharmed. I still don't know how he caught up to us seemingly magically, and why he just sat there at the end. But I don't even want to find out at this point. My now husband and I moved together almost 4 years ago to a rather nice, albeit expensive apartment complex in a sort of nice part of town. We are on the third floor with a large balcony that looks out onto the courtyard in which other apartments in the complex are located. Basically, you can see other balconies and living rooms of the other tenants and the open stairwells. A year went by without a hitch. My husband works at a bar, so he comes home late, while I usually make it home around 5. It is easy to get to any apartment doorway, as the complex is large and open with no security doors except the door to the apartment. It started in about August of 2016. I would be home after work chilling and watching TV almost always around 9:30, when I could hear someone come up the stairs. Things would be quiet, and all of a sudden, loud, sharp knocks on my door. I did not move because it was startling, but eventually went to look at the peephole. There stood 3 people, all with black hoodies on, all seemingly staring at the peephole like they could see me. I did not answer the door, and after a while they left. Cue a few weeks later, same time, but this incident's footsteps and then loud, hard bangs on the door that sent my cat flying to hide. I sat, frozen, but said to myself, maybe it's the police? I made it up to the peephole once again, this time staring out at one person, dark hoodie, male, white and very, very gaunt with huge black eyes. I again did not answer the door and grabbed a kitchen knife that I kept by my side until my husband came home. This continued for weeks, and once my husband was home, he proceeded to look out the peephole, saw the same man and screamed for him to leave, and he did. We called maintenance and the police, who both stated that they would do regular patrols, but nothing else, and suggested we put cameras. Everything stopped for a while, maybe 6 months during the winter, which helped me be at ease because when all this was happening, I was having a very hard time sleeping and stopped going out at night. However, I assumed the same man started up again, except this time the same large bangs on the door would happen, but when I would look out of the peephole, no one was there. I then became horrified as I started to notice extinguished cigarette butts by the side of my door, like someone was standing and waiting. I again reported it. Security stepped up in the area, but I did not feel safe. I was hoping it would just stop as I felt tortured in my own home. But as I realized 2 weeks ago, things could be much worse. At night, to go to bed, I would have to cross our eating area, which was right in front of our giant glass sliding door that led to our balcony. It was late at night, lights off in the apartment. As I walk by, I glance over and across the courtyard. I see the same man standing on the landing of the stairs across my way, from the 2nd to 3rd floor, staring right at my balcony. Just standing there, unmoved, facing in the direction of me. The same man at my door. I went numb, heart racing, chilled to the bone. I know he could have seen me because the lights were off and the stairway had lights of its own, but I was still scared nonetheless. I called my husband, who rushed over, but the man had left. More reports to the front office, more promised security patrols. This same creepy dead-eyed man in the black hoodie continued to stand at the stairway landing, staring at my apartment. It has now been 2 weeks, and he does this every Friday. I am horrified and have been having awful nightmares about someone breaking in and strangling me in my sleep. This is a picture of the stairway where he stands at night.